do think there's social cliques at Middlebury High School.
Yes.
I do, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Oh, absolutely.
I think they can be seen as rednecks and preps, or kind of by socioeconomic standards like middle class, lower class, upper class.
Well, there's a lot of division, especially amongst the sports. Like, you'll notice a very cliquey feel about the lacrosse team, or the Nordic team has like multiple cliques within it. It really depends on what clubs you're doing. Like, the band kids will really group around each other, but like, it's really, you don't notice much. Like, the lunches, the way they space the lunches, you'll notice that if you're in the same lunch as somebody, then you'll really know them. But like, if somebody's in a separate lunch, we'll barely know they're in the school.
I think there's a lot of division between where families come from. A lot of people from Middlebury are kind of stick together, and a lot of people from not Middlebury stick together, like Bridport.
Do you want me to just label them as they label themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. Rednecks, preps. The other day someone told me that jocks is the same as preps. So I was like, oh, and then there's the jocks. And they said, no, they're the same as the preps. Then I think there's your drama and kind of your artsy crew. I think there's also your more musical crew as well, so that's band. But I don't know what they go by.
I mean, it's fine to have your group of friends, but I think it can also like keep people from actually socializing, just like based on who they like think they are.
I see them as good. I think it's natural in an environment. Not everyone can be friends. Not everyone's going to be the same type of person. There's all sorts of diversity at our high school, and I think that's a good thing. I think when there's problems, that's when there's like bad relationships between the groups, which I don't really think is a thing here.
Do you want to talk about this scientifically?
Sure.
It's almost like a preservation thing. You need to find your tribe or whatever. It's a sense of not wanting to be alone. So you really need to become a part of this thing, this clique, to feel like you're going to survive high school.
For a long time, I thought, oh, it's just not okay to call them preps. It's not okay to call them rednecks or, the drama kids, because you're putting them in a box. And then in talking with the kids, that's how they self-identify too within their own group. And they're proud. Everybody they own that. It's a badge, and it's not something that is in any way a negative connotation. I don't think you could say that across the board. Everybody would say that, but for the most part, I think that there's real ownership and comfort and security in being a part of that group and naming it and owning it.
People are going to naturally group in some way or another. I think the only kind of detrimental thing is if people feel extremely excluded and isolated from one community that they want to be integrated into. As far as positive things, I think that being part of a clique and feeling secure in that can kind of eliminate a sense of vulnerability that otherwise people might have, and especially in a place like high school, if you have a tight-knit group of people, that can kind of help raise your own inner confidence about who you are. That being said, it could also kind of detract from if you're like always trying to conform to one group, it might detract from other parts of your personality. For one, I think that it's interesting because we're taught not to label ourselves since kindergarten. Like, you go to preschool and they're like, oh, don't call that person that or a name, it's not nice. Every person has the right to be who they are. So we grow up with this idea that you get to label yourself and no one else gets to label you. But then when it comes to you labeling yourself, you never want to label yourself one thing because you know you kind of like know the inner workings of who you are, and that you're so much more multidimensional than other people see.
I mean, like, I guess I'm in the prep side of the preps and redneck thing, but if you look at it like socioeconomically, I'm like more similar to the rednecks. Like, I fit in more with them. Like, a lot of the kids I hang out with are like college professor kids and doctor kids and stuff like that, and that's not me, but that's not who I don't identify with the kids that are more similar to me on socioeconomic standards, really.
I like to think I'm not, but if you ask someone else, I probably would be. Probably say I was like a redneck, but I don't see it like that.
I guess I identify with jazz band. That's a clique, if ever there was one. I don't really identify with the sports that I do, although I do like hanging around those people. I tend to detach myself though, so I don't know.
I don't know. I think people would put me somewhere, but I wouldn't say I'm part of like a one. I don't know.
I am friends with a lot of choir kids, but I feel like, you know, if someone were to describe me, it wouldn't be a choir kid. I would probably say a part of the football team, because that's probably what I mostly do.
I've been named as like a prep / I play sports, so I guess I'm like in that athletic kind of clique.
Entire cliques? Probably. Like, well, the idea of a clique, probably there will always be cliques, but like the ones that are currently going on will probably might die out a lot. Like, introduction of a new sport might create a new one and destroy an old one.
I'm sure they'll change and some will die out, but there'll always be some. So.
Honestly, it'll probably always like be like this. I don't know. It's just kind of like a high school sort of thing. I think it's really just like because we're in high school.
I'd like to think there would be that day, but I don't see it.
I never heard the preps versus rednecks thing so explicitly named when I was in high school. It's not that it didn't exist, and it's not that there weren't like people that were preppy and then people that were rednecky, but it wasn't like, that's pretty much the first thing that comes up every time I talk to people, which kind of surprised me. And then the other thing that comes up a lot is like rich people versus poor people, and that's not something that I remember. Again, like everyone was really aware of class in high school, but it wasn't something we talked about. And I was interviewing a friend who graduated the year after me yesterday, and she was saying that she thinks that one of the reasons that kind of like the whole socioeconomic status and wealth thing has become more prominent in the high school is because of the recession. So when the recession hit, it became a lot more obvious who had money and who didn't. And maybe that played into the way that people form groups and then also judge their peers.
I don't. I think if you just look in our culture, I mean, it's reinforced through everything. It's through media, through advertising, through movies. I mean, all the teen movies you see, there's always social groupings in those. And I just think there's also that sense of belonging where people feel safe and it's familiar, and we tend to gravitate towards what we know. And so I think it's always going to be really hard to break those barriers, because that's just culturally how we've been established.
It is impossible to deny that social cliques play a large role in the dynamics of high school.
As humans, we tend to naturally migrate to where we feel comfortable and connect with peers whom we feel we can relate to, whether it be through sports, clubs, socioeconomic status, or beliefs.
It's clear opinions vary when it comes to determining the goodness of these divisions.
But overall, everyone is aware of social cliques and generally see them as a natural and unavoidable occurrence.
We have been raised on the belief that labeling others is shallow, yet we are able to place each other in categories much more easily than ourselves.
It is natural and okay to surround yourself with people who make you happy, but it is important to not let these people define you.
Individuals are so much more than the labels placed on them.
If you see yourself as undefinable, then you are.
to the river. Will I ever see it like you? Oh, I question, honey, how these dreams gonna come true?